Thank you for the organizers to inviting me, and especially thanks to the audience to be so many at the last speech, which is not always the case. So thank to one more there is also, yeah. I wanted to speak about my experience because I was very long politician in Bosnia, almost 30 years I was involved in the politics there, but not during the war. At the beginning of the war, I said, this is not my time, and I just left from the politics, and I was at the university. Bosnia is a small country with a very difficult internal development. We are 4 million. At the beginning of the war, there were something like 45% of the Muslims, Bosniaks. I will simplify a little bit that. 1/3 Orthodox Serbs, and the rest, something like about 70% Croats, Catholics. And there was a problem before the war, how the Bosnia would look like after the break of the former Yugoslavia. Then there were, I will simplify it in order not to take too much time to go to the details. You can be then too confused. Let's say there were two main views how the Bosnia has to look like. One was so-called country like any other country, centralized country with a single president, single parliament, single government. There was another group that was mainly by the Bosniaks, Muslims. On the other hand, Orthodox Serbs wanted independent state. To simplify the differences. International community tried before the war to offer some solutions. There were at least 3, 4, maybe even 5 different proposals, which basically have the same attitude. Bosnia will remain like a country, but it will be decentralized. No one wanted that. None of the sides. They said we can achieve more. And the war began. War which had at least 100,000 people killed, which is close to 3% of the population, and more than a half of the population displaced during the war. 4 years after, we had again proposal which was similar to that at the beginning, and it was accepted. So 4 years lost, 100,000 people killed, so many destructions that you cannot imagine, and accepted proposal which was basically there before the war. The question is why that happened. Why this solution was, at the end of the day, accepted by the local players. I think that there are 3 reasons for that. After 4 years of the war, first reason, the forces on the ground finally understood that they cannot achieve maximum. They were tired of the war. People were tired of the war, and everybody wanted some sort of the solution. Second reason why it finally happened was international community was united. We, and that was the reason why I asked you this question, is there any third side? On our own, we were not able to sit and to discuss. If it was only on us, we will continue with the war, even who knows how many years. And then international community, and again, this is I agree with you also, it was United States, mainly. They were united. When I said international community was united, it was developed, the program, the solution was developed by the Americans, but it was strongly and honestly supported by the Russia and by the EU. And when you have a big powers together, and if they don't have their players on the ground, you can achieve the solution. If the big powers are not united and have their own favorite sides on the ground, solution is, according to my opinion, not possible. So the unity of the international community was maybe the most significant precondition for the peace in Bosnia. Without that, I am very pessimistic that something could happen based on our own efforts on the ground. That because the same leaders who started the war, they were still there. There were no new names, new faces, no one. So the only someone who could bring a little bit was international community. And as I remember, maybe East Timor is also the case of relatively, but you know much better than me. I cannot remember which case was so successful like Bosnia of the international policy in the last decades. We are not perfect. We are not ideal. But at least last 20 years we don't have serious incidents based on the ethnic conflicts. We are full of the political instability, but there is no real conflict among the people. And I have to say that the big prize for that goes to the international community. In our case, without that, no chance to agree. And the third reason why this was acceptable is the fact the solution was in between. So, win-win situation, if we can say so. So one side had the Bosnia like a umbrella, like a state, but another side has entity structure, which means high level of, not independency, but autonomy, very high level of the autonomy. So what is important? There was no winner in the war, but which is even more important, there was no loser. Because if you have a side who lost, it will wait for the second half of the game, it will try to achieve something which was not, and this is the solution. So lessons learned from Bosnia is, if you are in a country with a conflict, it would be good if the big players are together. It would be good if the local forces are tired of the conflict and the war, and the solution is always in between. So using this opportunity, I tried in a few conferences like this to speak a little bit about the potential solution in Ukraine. And I said, if you apply that, what is happening in Bosnia, that means at least 4, 5, maybe 6 years of the war there, 6 to 7 million people killed, and close to 100 million displaced, including both sides, not only Ukraine. Why we shall to wait for that? Why not to start now to speak? What is a problem with speaking about the potential discussion to solve that problem? I was heavily criticized that what I said is in favor of Russia. No. I really think no, because Russia cannot win. Russia cannot, in long term, completely destroy the Ukraine. Cannot. On the other hand, Ukraine cannot win against the Russia, or maybe can, but it will happen in 10, 15, 20 years. So what do we do if we don't start discussion? It's nice to speak about the basic principles from this nice place, air conditioning, sun, good food, everything, but imagine people there. And because of that, I think that this is a lesson which I learned also after so many years in politics, that lesson that the international community is very often, very international politics is matter of fashion. At some moment somebody said something and everybody repeats that. No one is able to say a little bit differently. So I really believe that, and I'm, because of current situation, very pessimistic for any conflict around the world, because as long as the big powers have, they will use any opportunity to continue their fight on the other places. And just to without that, I don't see how we can achieve the solutions anywhere in the world. Maybe I'm too pessimistic, but this is my view, and I really believe in that. Bosnia is not a perfect society, as I said, but it works. For instance, I have made always a joke with myself, because I'm always introduced like a president of Bosnia. I said, I'm not the real president, I'm 1/3, because we don't have a president, we have a presidency, one Serb, one Bosniak, one Croat. And the Pope visited Bosnia and asked me, at that time I was German, and you know, in diplomacy there is this tete-a-tete meeting, which means two persons reality. In our case, tete-a-tete meeting means one from one side, three from the other side, plus, because if, and there are some members which are not English speaking, so plus interpreters. So in that case, it was four persons on the other side. He asked me, how do you function? And I said, you know, we have one rule. If we agree, we will go to the public. If we disagree, we will stay among us, it will stay among us as long as we don't agree. He said, like marriage. Looks nice from outside. Inside, we know that it's a little bit different. And that was Pope comment, not mine. And then he asked me, but do you agree from time to time? I said, yes, we agree on a lot of things. We have some things where we disagree. And he said that you are the real evidence that the Holy Trinity is possible. In these countries with the conflict, you have to be very sensitive. The role of the culture can be positive, but I agree with you, in some elements can be extremely sensitive. Let's say in that way. For instance, culture is the question of identity. And very often the conflicts on the ground are based on identity issues. And if you are too enthusiastic about the cultural exchange, you can make wrong steps. And the lesson also learned in Bosnia is, for instance, we didn't have a full exchange of the folklore groups in Bosnia. That we start first, maybe 5 years after the war, somewhere else, outside of the country. So it was relatively easy for the people to meet first time. Same with the theater. You know, they also couldn't do it immediately. Later, yes. Even now, 30 years ago, there was some problem just recently in Bosnia when one theater coming from Sarajevo, who was established during the war, was a guest of the theater in Banja Luka, which is Serb-dominated, the capital of the Serb Republic there in Bosnia. There was heavily criticized the people, this theater in Banja Luka, why they invited them. And then the people, the actors from Banja Luka said, we were the soldiers of our army, Republic Srpska army, how can you think that we will forbid these people who were there because they were there, the part of their society. So we have to exchange each other. It is nothing to stop us. So the message is, it's good to have that. It's a way which can soften the conflicts, but very carefully, not directly, not too quickly, because it can create some sort of the negative approach. So Bosnia will continue to be a challenging country, but I'm quite optimistic that we will go in a good direction. Something which is extremely significant for us is to be a part of the European Union. Then immediately our internal differences will be less relevant. We will be a part of the larger community, and all of you who lived in the countries of the EU, you know that the people from Balkans are not making difficulties within the EU, and there are a lot of them there. We are able to accept the rule, but one condition, don't put us in a situation to decide, because then we will have a conflict. But if someone else accepted that, for us this is not the problem. And honestly, I am very much against big discussions about the new constitutional order of Bosnia. It will just reopen old stories. Immediately there will be 3 different approaches. One, again, mainly Bosnia, Sarajevo, one man, one vote, one president, one government. In Republic Srpska, it will be independent RS. The Croats will try to have something which they call third entity, and they cannot agree. No way. Then, now, international community to impose something can be done maybe, but there is no, at least Russia supporting that, which is very different comparing with that time. Additionally, when the Dayton was agreed, three countries which were very important for the Bosnia, Turkey, Serbia, and Croatia, they were supportive also. They pressed the local players. Do we have conditions these days that they will agree about the new solution? Honestly, I don't see any chance for that. So, and Bosnia, at the end of the day, is not more complicated than Belgium, than Swiss. But there is one difference. The people there and the politicians mainly, not completely, but mainly accepted the rules. In our case, we are trying to cheat each other. And we are trying that for the 30 years without a single success. Everything is the same. We cannot do that because every side is able to protect their own interest. So the precondition is to accept the rules and to elect politicians who are ready to find solutions. Without the politicians ready to find solutions, this is not possible. Unfortunately, we are all living in a way where the populism is, even in Europe, there is a lack of the leaders with the vision. So if Europe has a problem with that, then you can imagine how that looks in the Balkans, and then within the Balkans in Bosnia. So it is not so easy. But in spite of all difficulties, I am optimistic, and I believe that the country will remain stable, that there will be no big solution, that there is no big changes, that there is no way to have a break of the Bosnia or to have two centralized country. I don't see any reason for that. So I hope that I was enough short and that didn't take too much time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the benefit of being concise is that it gives us more opportunities for engagement and questions and comments. Thank you so much, first of all, for the excellent presentation. Please, let's start with Willem.
Yes, I was at the European Commission at the unit in DG Enlargement for Bosnia Herzegovina. I was economic desk officer and dealt with Bosnia for many years.
Oh, when that was?
That was in 2016, 2015, 2018. I have a question. You mentioned this, I thought it was a very interesting example about culture not overcoming differences, about this theater exchange. Now, my question is, how can you expect a country that doesn't even know if it wants to be a country unite to enter the EU under such conditions? Because you seem to expect that the EU will make everything all right. But it doesn't work like that. The country itself has to move forward, which it isn't. And of course now the EU has determined to open negotiations with Bosnia. But I have a very simple question. Who's going to negotiate? Because you already said, you know, it's very difficult to cooperate. So,
the main responsibility for that is on us. But there is also a huge responsibility on the European Union. And being long in a politics, I witnessed a lot of events. Thessaloniki summit was something which was excellent. So positive approach. Yeah. And because of the chance that we can do that, like a politician who was in Bosnia, we did few reforms. It was not imposed. We created a single army. Can you imagine in 2005, I think it was, so just 10 years after the war, where 100,000 people was killed. We did, without imposition, the most sensitive reform, which is that. I was a part of that at that time. Second, we have completely separated tax system. Because of the European perspective, we created a single VAT at the level of the state. Okay, there was one reform which was imposed. This is the Secret Service, this information agency. That was only imposed by the High Representative. So there was a positive attitude. 2 years later, I was in an informal lunch with the President and the Prime Minister of the European Union. They said, after Croatia, for the decades there will be no more enlargement. They said in front of me. Formally they said, the doors are open. But then in informal meeting they said the doors are closed. We are now almost 2 decades after that meeting, and as you see, still the doors are closed. Will they be open? Do we have a chance to start negotiations without the war in Ukraine? No. No. The real reason why the negotiations are there is war in Ukraine. Geopolitical strategy, not really honest perception that region has to be a part of that. Without the war in Ukraine, believe me, that maybe I'm pessimistic, maybe I'm too cynical, but I think that I am realistical. That wouldn't be. That doesn't mean that it's excuse for us. It's not. I agree with that. We have to do the key reforms, but you know, if the politicians see that this is not realistical, you have, especially in the Balkans, politicians who then tried, well, politicians are animals trying to survive, to continue to be in the power. The easiest way then to be populistic. I defend my nation. I have an enemy which is on the other side. I am the only one who can protect my side. And then if we lost that, we promoted the conditions for this. And these people are not very much interested in European Union, honestly. Majority of the Balkan leaders, they are not interested in institutions. They're interested in their personal power, which is completely different than Europe, as I understood that. But in spite of that, there are forces in a country who are able to do that. I will repeat again. 20 years ago, we did the most difficult reforms after the war. Built united army and created united fiscal system. Which challenge do we have so politically sensitive like this? There is nothing. Nothing. What is there are just peanuts comparing with that challenge. Current leaders, they will be not able to negotiate with you. Current leaders, but I hope that very soon there will be, and there are very clear signs that there will be a group of the people who are ready to make that. And I am very, very, very pessimistic. And again, Bosnia is not more complicated than the current member, like Belgium. Bosnia is more united than the current member of Cyprus. So you cannot say because of not unity, you cannot be that. There are too many, let's say, special cases. By the way, you will have a real right if the rules will be applied everywhere. But the problem with international community is case-by-case approach. And that is a big problem. You cannot say, for instance, Cyprus can be, in spite of the fact that they are not united, that they didn't solve their internal problems, but Bosnia cannot be. I will ask you why. Or, if you say, for instance, Kosovo can be independent, but some other parts cannot. Why? What's the difference? So the main message, according to my knowledge of international, apply the rules always in the same way for every side, and then you are really based on the principles. Case by case will not work. My opinion.
Yeah, I disagree, but yeah.
Okay? Yeah. No, I'm trying to say my. I don't want to convince anybody to change the opinion.
Ambassador Bogue.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, I must say that the approach of being pragmatic and realistic is so refreshing nowadays in the world. So thank you very much for your presentation. And I would like to relate to something, what you were talking about culture. After all, we sit in the Institute of, or Academy for Culture Diplomacy. We are all have been talking here now for nearly 2 decades about the role of culture, the role of identity manifested in culture. and what kind of role this culture can really play in peace building. So if after 20 years it is still a problem for
30 years.
30 years, it's still a problem for the three parts of Bosnia relate openly and with a positive attitude towards the other culture. You know, what is really what we are talking about here? This is one. I'm sorry, I just want to be sort of more punchy in that, because really this is what we are talking. What does role culture can have in tormented times? Really, what is why are we doing cultural diplomacy nowadays? And the other thing is that you have more than 50% Bosnian, right? Around 30% Serbian and 20% sort of Croatian or something like that. So, what kind of role religion plays? Yeah, because it is so strongly related to culture and culture diplomacy and the whole concept of soft power. Thank you very much.
You know, thank you for the questions. All these things are sensitive. It's not so easy to answer on that. You know, I agree also with, you know, typically in conflict societies, every side believes that this side is a victim. And you will find very rare cases of the internal conflicts where one side accepted that they were really responsible. Maybe South Africa is, speaking about an internal conflict, the only one. I cannot remember any other. So what is common in Bosnia also, every side believes that they are the victims. And they can find the arguments in the history, in the current events, and which means that it's very difficult to find a common view of that, what happened. And because of that, my pragmatic approach is just to leave it a little bit aside and not to open that discussion, because in advance I know that there is no agreement. So I don't want to change opinion of the other side. I cannot. They cannot change my opinion. So what shall we do in that circumstances? It's better than to say, okay, let's leave it for some time and let's have a discussion about the future, about something that we can agree. If I have enough time, I can tell you one personal story.
Dinner time.
One personal story. When I was the Prime Minister of Republika Srpska, that was 5 years after the war, there was all the mosques in Banja Luka were destroyed. And then there was big pressure from the international community to rebuild one. I said at that time, I think it's too early. No one really wanted to accept that. There was ceremony, few people were killed, there was huge riots, small group of the Muslims were pressed in one room, all ambassadors were there, and the people wanted to send, you know, Molotov cocktail on that to burn this house. There were tanks of the international community, of the forces, international, just 500 meters far from that place. That general called me, I was in my office, that he had ordered to start with the tanks to go there to free these people. On the other hand, Serbs at that time had so many weapons, and they were not afraid of the tanks because they were 4 years in the war. It could be the real bloodshed. Then I said, please stop. I went to this place. I entered like a prime minister in that building, and I said I will stay with them as long as the last one will not leave and be safe. I came to my house after that, and you cannot imagine how the Serbs attacked me. You cannot imagine that. Although I'm a Serb.
Oh, you are a Serb,
Yeah. I was a treater, and my daughter, at that time, she was 7 years old. She was in the class, and everybody laughed with her that her father was the only one of the Serbs who was with the Muslims, and that all others were outside. Why the other kid criticized me? So it was also a very strong personal challenge, which you have to do. Yesterday, we rebuilt after that all these mosques again, and yesterday the first ceremony in Banja Luka of the celebrating the secondary schools event after the fourth class was madrasa students from the Islamic community. They opened that in a Serb-dominated part. So that's the reason when I said too early can create huge problems in spite of everything. You have to prepare the conditions for that. Religion had a key, I think, role in the past for the conflicts, also even in the last one. So a lot of people will disagree with that, what I would say, but I would say we are same people with the three different names, but mentality, culture, language, everything is the same, just one difference, religion. And without that, I don't see that there will be a problem. And a place where we had too many big powers there, Austria, Ottoman Empire, and that was the consequences because in order to keep under control the population, they had their different favorites. And then favorites are in a good position, but the others were in a bad. And that was internal division among the people. That is a part of explanation. Recently, there is a big effort to reduce the role of religious communities publicly, in media, everywhere, and I think that we succeeded in that. It's not so like it was 10, 20, 30 years ago.
People are complaining about the noise. Do we have an additional question or comments before we move? Okay, over there. Okay, excellent.
First of all, I want to thank you for such a great speech, lots of lesson to learn. And while listening to it, I got one question, that's that while you have many international players and they all have different perspectives, different views, how do you get them into one shared point of view in order to cooperate instead of interfering with the matters?
You know, I said to my colleagues that I'm writing a book, and that I was inspired by one book when Jackie Collins did the book All My Lovers, experience with them. So I decided to write a book with the title All My High Representatives, meaning it was, I don't want, okay, too many young people here, so don't want to compare that. There are some similarities in that. International community had a lot of positive developments. Without international community, there wouldn't be a Bosnia. There wouldn't be a peace. Anybody cannot say differently than that. So we have to be very thankful. But on the other hand, you know, we have high representative who had the right to dismiss the people, to impose the laws, to really be almost like a Raja. We called Pedi down there like he was British guy who was high representative of Bosnia. We called him Raja because he dismissed in one day almost 100 elected politicians around the Bosnia. 100 in one day. And also lesson learned from that is don't give unlimited power to anybody. Because even if it's coming from the West, if it's unlimited, it will be regime. It will be the emperor. You know, it cannot, even with the democratic, you cannot, especially if you were not important in your country, and he was not important there. And he in Bosnia, he was like a god. Pedi, he. Yeah. And another problem of that is who controls these guys with the power. At the beginning, Bosnia was very important. So the ministers were meeting in we have Peace Implementation Council, which means the key players, Russia, United States, European Union, European countries, Turkey, Japan, the countries which finance the recovery of the economy in Bosnia. And there were the ministers there. Later, after Bosnia was removed from that, it was so-called political directors. In reality, this was third or fourth level of the bureaucrats from the State Department or some ministries of foreign affairs. They cannot say no to the high representative. So nobody controlled the high representative, and then depends on him. I have to say that we had a benefit of these better relations on the big powers. I remember the time when Ivanov, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who was before the Lavrov, was a meeting in the NATO headquarters because Russia was the member of Partnership for Peace, like Bosnia was. We cannot imagine how that was positive for us at that time. So they were there, and this is the first phase of the final membership, as I know. It was designed in that way. So whenever international community was united, it was positive. But then, after this, what happened geopolitically, additionally, now we have a big difference between the two players, because Russia is out of the Peace Implementation Council these days after the war in Ukraine. We have on one hand United States and the UK, who are very tough and trying to press the High Representative to be more involved. And then we have European Union who said, no, we need institutions, we cannot accept imposition of that. It was not so easy to be the Serb politician in Bosnia after the war, and I was in that position. I know how difficult that was. But now it's even worse to be the High Representative in Bosnia, even more challenging, because there is no unity. And everybody expects from him to do something. 30 years after the war. And I think that the current one is the former Minister of Agriculture of Germany, Schmidt. So I don't know what he will do at the end of the day and which he will find. But again, a lesson. Rules have to be applied in the same way. International community in a countries with a conflict cannot have favorites. Cannot, simply cannot. Because if you don't apply the same rules, there is always a side who is trying to use or misuse international community, believing they will support me, they will support me. They don't want them to agree, to sit, to make a real honest agreement.
Okay, I think we need to go. There's a final short question. Please make it short response, and then we'll move on to the next presentation.
Hello, thank you for the presentation, Mr. President. My question is that if we look at the history, the countries which have been affected by war, there has been always third-party intervention. Was this the same in the case of Bosnia or no? Thank you.
Bosnia, we simply needed at some point the third side. We couldn't do it on our own. But now I really believe that we are slowly becoming, having a situation that we can slowly start to agree. But then really the precondition is for that to have politicians ready for to make agreement. I will give you one example again. When I was elected, I offered to my two colleagues, one Croat and one Bosniak, let's go to the place where the Serbs, Bosniaks, and the Croats were killed. We will not speak, we will be silent. The religion leaders will pray for the victims. We will just commonly put the flowers there to pay respect for all sides. It was not possible. One side said we need two. Not one place, we need two. And then if you don't have this sort of the feeling that you have to start to make some, and this is not the big story, it's a relatively small story. It's nothing which is so challenging, but it would have very positive impact on the people on the ground if that happened, but it didn't happen. To expect after the so difficult war that Bosnia can be immediately united, looks very nice, but it's not realistic. You have families, every family has a victim there. Every family has had consequences of that war. So how we can expect that the people who were just, in a war, killed each other, can, during their lifetime, change immediately that and to create the beautiful society. So we need a time. And we really need a time. Speaking about the international community, Americans have two things. They are extremely efficient when they want, but really want to implement what they decided, but they are not sensitive. They don't care about the details. And very often in societies like mine, in the details there are tricks in the details there. Europeans, on the other side, they are very sensitive, but extremely inefficient. So if we can create from two of them, a single one with the best possible, I think that I would prefer to have international community in that case. But without having this enough sensitivity and readiness for the efficient, very often the role can be counterproductive. That's my experience. Maybe I'm too critical, I don't want to change anybody's opinion, but this is my experience, and I honestly believe in that what I said. That's my experience, that's my way of thinking, without pretending to change any other opinion. Thank you. I think it was too much from Bosnia.
Thank you so much for an excellent presentation and for taking the questions afterwards.